Okay, so I'm going to start, otherwise we're going to be here all day. I'm really sorry. It's already been an hour and a half past lunchtime. We were supposed to have a short lunch, and that was a very long lunch. Sneaky way of getting a long lunch, guys. Okay, ooh, why is this skipping ahead? Okay, so what we're going to look at now is how to make ethical decisions in complex scenarios and understanding the implications of the code. Okay, so what we discussed briefly before we realized there was no one in the room was the various ethical principles, and we spoke earlier this morning about principles and what's important and what's worth following. And if you look at all of these, they're all important: autonomy, benevolence, empathy, justice. When, remember, we have those two choices, how do we decide which one is more important versus the other? And that is an ethical or moral decision that we have. Okay. So it becomes this competing moral paradigms, and then how do we make a decision? So in the scenario I mentioned, sorry for those that I'm repeating it to, just after lunch, we spoke about you catch your colleague stealing 8,000 Rand from petty cash. You know they have a sick daughter and they're unemployed, and she promises to pay back the amounts after payday. So your options include, number one, you can either prosecute, which have legal costs to the firm and public knowledge of the matter, or number two, you can have repayment of the amounts and quiet resignation. Okay, with number two, obviously, you'll have the employer has no cost, and the employee retains their dignity. But now when we look at these ethical paradigms, we can see the two in contradiction. So in which option, and I asked this before, maybe you can just answer me again so we can see. Truth, which option is truth served by? Option one or option two? If you can just give me an indication of one or two so we can track who's here and what's happening. Are you sure anyone's here? Thank you, Aziz. Okay, so truth is by prosecution. Sorry, it's really hard. I can't even see myself. I don't know if you guys are on. Last time I could see who was on. Okay, Aziz, are you the only man here still? Okay, so loyalty is served by number two. When we look at the next one, we can see individual or community. So obviously the individual is served by repayment, the community by prosecution. On short term, if we get repayment, that sorts out the problem, but long term, you've still got a problem that they might steal again. And I'm sure you've heard many stories where people take a little bit and then they go on and they get away with it and they take more and more. There's some horrendous stories about a bookkeeper who steals millions, okay? And even in the Western Cape, in the Rugby Association, I know there was also a big fraud happening there. Okay, justice versus mercy. So justice is served by prosecution, but mercy is obviously by two. So now how do we make these decisions when these two are in contradiction, or not even contradiction, but like both important and difficult to determine which way? So I'm going to briefly share with you some ethical theories. People have tried to box ethics in the past, but you'll see that this process doesn't work. So there's the golden rule of do unto others as you do unto yourself, but we spoke earlier, if I'm a Satanist, you don't want me to do unto you as I do unto others. Then there's the golden mean, so it means that at one extreme someone's brave and another extreme someone's a coward, but in the in the average, everyone has courage. But we know that that's not true because it's over a vast spectrum. Utilitarianism, so we spoke about that. We spoke about that as we started with the railway line. So the most benefit for the least cost, so saving 5 over 1. But we could still see that that wasn't the best solution for everyone. And under this method, people can justify some horrendous things. And also to whose pleasure versus to whose pain. Okay, in a simplistic view, in a way, maybe Hitler could have justified himself under this method. Okay, the categorical imperative means that once there is a rule, the rule is set, and that is the law. But we know that people spend forever in court disputing this rule versus that rule in this circumstance. And utopianism, where everyone's rights and needs are fulfilled. Okay, so none of these ethical philosophies actually work. So with that in mind, how do we address an ethical dilemma? And earlier today we spoke about, is it law? So that's our starting point. Is it law? Obviously, then if it is law and it's breaking the law, that's unethical. Okay, but how do we know when we have an ethical dilemma? So you can have a look at these. We've spoken about that. We've got conflict of interest. You don't feel comfortable. You've got a lack of independence. There's some reason that things aren't sitting with you. You can benefit from the action taken. Someone else is pushing you because they benefit from the action taken. Okay. And then obviously we've got the code, which we need to comply with. And this is not an optional tick box exercise, guys. This is something that needs to be complied with. And now Kanya was, before the break, telling us all the 5 elements of the code. Now she doesn't even seem to be back with us. So we know the 5 elements of the code. We know integrity, objectivity, professional competence, due care. And the importance now is acting this out. What does integrity look like? What does objectivity look like? So we're not breaching our independence, our confidentiality, and getting involved in those. Okay, so these are some of the threats to the code. So what I'd like you to do, just quickly, since I have a couple of you online, so Nkosi, if you can tell me, okay, I don't want to do all of this. I'll tell you what the threat means. And then Nkosi, you can give me an example of the safeguards for self-interest. Aziz, Ziz, you can give me an example of a safeguard of self-review threat. And Boledi, you can give me an example of safeguard for advocacy threat. And who else have I got there? Caesar, you can give me an example of a safeguard of familiarity threat. So you can type in your answers, please, and you can now I can't remember the order, so as I refer to you, you can put in the answer. So I'm going to explain what a self-interest is. Self-interest is obviously you have an interest in and therefore a benefit. So it's like me having shares in a company and then auditing the company. I'm not going to be objective, okay? So how do we guard against this? Who did I ask for that? Nkosi, how do we make sure that in audit we don't have self-interest threats? They can't talk at all here. They can't talk. Okay, I hope the others of you are thinking of your examples. Okay, while Nkosi's answer is coming through, so the system is very delayed. Sorry, guys. I'm going to go, I'll come back to your answer, Nkosi, when it comes up. Self-review threat. So the self-review threat is like I prepare the tax computation and then I audit it, which obviously then threatens again my objectivity because I think I did it right the first time. So how do we have, what example do we have of this? Aziz, do you have your answer ready to go? Maybe guys just send them through and then as they come up I can trace them back. So the advocacy threat is when you advocate on someone's behalf. So if you're auditing a client and they have a litigation or a court case, then you act on their behalf and defend them or advocate that people buy shares in them because you know about them. So you're acting on their behalf or selling on their behalf. And that is something that then also threatens objectivity, independence, integrity, all of those good things. Okay, and then the familiarity threat is something that if we are too familiar with it because we've audited it for year after year, then we again lose our objectivity and our independence. And we'll come back to that for, there's no answers coming through. No, it's one word answer. Okay, and then the intimidation threat. So the intimidation threat is like that bullying. So if you don't give me a clean audit, I won't give you this audit next year. Okay, and obviously again you can see how all of these are threats to the code of conduct because you don't have that you don't have that integrity, objectivity, professional care, and competence. Okay, so the safeguards against this are self-interest threats as independence declarations, self-review threat are these. Thank you, is ensuring that your work is reviewed by an external party, exactly, so you can't review the work that you've prepared. Advocacy threat is that you're not allowed to advocate on the behalf. Familiarity threat, that's firm rotation, partner rotation. And intimidation threat, well, yeah, that comes down to moral courage, and we'll look at that again. But yeah, you have, and those assertive conversations, standing up for the integrity of what is happening. Okay, so what I want to do to show you is another epic ethical dilemma or failure. And I want you to just, when you watch this clip, to think about what threat may have occurred here in this situation. Okay, so just watching it with that self-interest threat, self-review threat, advocacy threat, familiarity threat, intimidation threat, what threat do you think was most prevalent in this case? Okay, of Steinhoff. And this is a summary of what happened in the Steinhoff case.
It's the biggest corporate scandal the JSE has ever seen. The Steinhoff debacle has shocked the nation. But the question is, how did so many South African asset managers miss this? We spoke to Prescient Investment Management's Seisu Matlanyana. Who is Steinhoff?
Okay, so Steinhoff is a multinational company that has businesses all over the world, including here in South Africa. And it was a company that was started back in the 1960s, and through a series of what seemed like very good acquisitions, became one of the biggest and most successful companies to be headquartered here in South Africa. Some of the more popular retail brands like Pep Ackermans, and Tikitown are all under the Steinhoff banner.
So what is the debacle actually all about?
So on Wednesday, the 6th of December, the company was set to announce its financial results, but instead they announced two things. One, that the long-standing CEO had resigned, and two, that there was an independent investigation into financial irregularities regarding the company's financial reports. Now, investors lost all confidence in financial information that they've been provided by the company and started selling their shares aggressively, and the share price fell by over 60% in a single day, which is something no one had quite seen, especially from a company that size, and it wiped tens of billions of rands off of the face of the planet.
So how did so many South African asset managers miss this?
Oh, it's a darling company. It's a top 40 share. It's on, you see it on the Springbok jersey. It's everyone trusted the brand. Everyone assumed that the system would make sure that none of this happens. King 3, corporate governance policies. You have auditors, you have a regulator. It's unfathomable that a company could hide so much, or at least mislead to the extent that is being applied in the market. So, yeah, if you weren't looking for the worst case scenario, which this is, it was very easy to miss.
What are the next steps?
Still difficult to say. We'll see what the investigation says. But all we know at this stage is that the company is trying to restructure, refinance some of its borrowing, selling some of its assets. It's trying to create some flexibility and also separate the good businesses from the non-core ones, so that if it does come to it, at least the core businesses are somewhat insulated. But at this stage, it's difficult. We need to hear how far away from the truth they were, and that will be as a result of the outcome of the investigation. And then, yeah, we'll see. But I don't see it disappearing from the face of the earth. But also at the same time, I don't see it recovering to what it was.
Okay, thanks, Nkosi. I see, sorry, there's such a delay in the system. I've lost the system this morning. As you typed, it came through. Now we've got a long delay. Okay, so some of the threats that happened here is familiarity threat. Those business analysts just assumed everything was okay. The audit firm on this was Deloitte. They'd been on it for a long time. They did rotate partners, but so there's a lot of things that people just thought it was a darling company and took for granted. Okay, so you can see how those threats can lead to an unethical behavior coming through. Okay, so when you have unethical behavior, we need to find out all the facts. Remember that perception and seeing things at different angles. You can't look at stuff in isolation. You need to see the whole big picture. So consider all the possibilities, get all the information that is required. And then remember I said that the safeguard against which threat intimidation threat was probably moral courage. And so the next video is by IFAC. IFAC are the International Federation of Accountants. They're basically the SAICA of the UK. And this is what he says about the code of conduct and the need for moral courage. If anyone else has joined us online, please just say, hi, I'm here, so that I know that you are here. Lizanne, Shaman, Felicia, Mpo, we're missing you guys. I just want to see if anyone's around while we watch this. Thanks.
We understand exactly the principles of ethical behaviour that govern accountants. But it's one thing knowing the theory. In practice, when one is faced with ethical challenges, both for oneself or seeing it in the professional life of others, colleagues, clients, whatever the situation one finds oneself in, taking a stand on this requires a level of fortitude that I believe is underestimated today. If you're a young 20-something accountant, even if you're a 50-something partner, we cannot underestimate the fortitude that's required to make a stand. Hence, ICAS really believes to allow those 5 ethical principles to be worked out, to be lived out, we need to encourage and exemplify and describe a level of moral courage that recognises the seriousness of living out those other values and what's required to actually live that out well. So we really believe that moral courage should be a component, one of the defining characteristics of professional accountants today. Because without any doubt at all, every single one will face an ethical dilemma related to those principles. And I'm absolutely certain to address those, to deal with those, to respond with those in a very, very effective way, one will need moral courage. Hence, we really believe there needs to be a 6th ethical principle, moral courage.
Okay, that's entirely true, because without moral courage, like I said, it takes guts to stand up and do the right thing, especially against someone more senior, which in a lot of these situations is the case. And there's a cost to yourself often. So you need to keep that greater world context, greater benefit for all. In all the government scandals of VBS Bank and Eskom and all those other dilemmas, there's been like 1 or 2 whistleblowers. The one was in SAA, where she stopped them spending a whole fortune of money. Cynthia, she was done out of a job, she was intimidated, all sorts of things. It's hard to be a whistleblower, but so that moral courage is so important, and then so is the greater societal good, and we'll look at that in a little bit. But yeah, good things don't come easy, and I don't say this flippantly, but it cost Nelson Mandela 27 years, and not him alone, to fight against apartheid, and that's what it takes to fight against unethical behavior sometimes, the cost for individuals versus the greater good for society. So it's just something to consider, because I know it's really hard when you've got all those pressures and all those responsibility to do that right thing. Okay, so you do have codes to comply with. The SAICA and URBA Code of Ethics. This is, again, not a checkbox, and the shall implies that you will do that. Okay. Any other legal, I'm just going to start going through this, guys, quickly, so that we get, because we've already wasted like an hour and a half. So I'm sorry, if you've got any questions as I'm whizzing through all of this, please just ask them in the chat box and I'll get to them. But we spoke about earlier, what is the law? There's lots of laws that you as accountants need to comply with. So there's anti-money laundering, NOCLA, corruption, the Companies Act. And as we said, if it's not legal, it's not ethical. That is point 1. And we have a lot of legal obligations and requirements and legislature that needs to be adhered to. So that's the first point. And then you need to consider your public interest. So who is your client? Especially as an auditor, who is your client? Your client is not the person that you go and sit at. It's the stakeholders, that greater community and greater good. So as much as management or directors want something out of the audit, you need to be there as that objective, independent source for the greater good of the greater stakeholders. Okay, so you also need to consider if they're reporting or ethical tip-off requirements. So there's lots of mechanisms which you can use, whistleblowers, what is the a code of ethics of an organization. If those codes are in place, then that is the next port of call. Is it legal? Is there that code? What is the principle? Speak up, speak out. Now, I went to a talk at the end of last year about ethics by a doctor from KPMG of ethics, and he spoke about the fact that KPMG at that stage didn't even have a whistleblowing line. Okay, so sometimes now these things are mandatory because we tell our clients that they need them. Now we have them in audit firms. Okay, so now for that trainee, there was no place for her to blow the whistle. Okay, I'm going to skip these, and I just want to come back to. Sorry, no, it doesn't want to go back. Okay, document. It's really important that you document your decision-making process. So what are the alternatives? What do you know about? How are you happy to defend it? Have you done any tip-offs? Okay, what else you need to document? You've got all of these in your notes, guys, so you can refer back to them. What was an overview of the issue? Remember I spoke to you about going to speak to someone. What are the alternatives? Why didn't you follow them? What information did you know? What is the process? Okay. So when you are doing all these things, is it possible, Aziz says, is it possible in your career to be at risk because of being too ethical? For example, state capture whistleblowers. Okay, I'd love to open that question up to everybody, but this platform doesn't let me so easily. Unfortunately, the answer is yes, because there's a cost to doing the right thing, and at the moment, people who are whistleblowing aren't being well enough protected. I know that lady, Cynthia from SAA, she's starting like a tip-off support group. A personal friend of mine was also was a whistleblower, and there isn't much support, and also financially then they just cut you off. But look at the consequence of just having been associated with KPMG. A lot of people were leaving KPMG off their CVs, or when asked, like, where did your articles, it was at that firm with the 4 blue dots. So the ethical consequences of the firm are now being on the individual as well. So yeah, you just have to fight the good fight as the best way you can, and there are unfortunately costs involved. And you have to weigh that up. But what I firmly believe, guys, is doing the right thing in the little things will stop the bigger things. And the more that we do the right things in our circle of influence, the more we change the ripple. I think that in South Africa, we've become a society that has been governed by lawlessness at such a large extent that now it's become acceptable or justifiable that what's 1,000 Rand versus a 1 trillion Rand fire pool, etc., etc. So you justify your ethical slide or your moral basis. Okay, so and that's why it's important, what are your values and what are you standing up, and why it takes moral courage to do the right thing. Okay, Aziz, I hope I answered that question sufficiently. Please, if not, you can pose it in a different way or do a different question. Unfortunately, it isn't a great answer. Okay, so we're going to document it. Then we make some easy things to avoid, and I spoke about this. Being a frog. A lot of people don't know what that means. Being a frog in boiling water means that if you put a frog into boiling water, it jumps out. If you put a frog into cold water and gently raise the temperature, he boils to death. And that's what happens in unethical situations. And even in that example of that lady standing up against her colleagues selling bad material, we let things slide until it's too late. The whole environment is unethical and we're a frog. We've got no energy to jump out. So rather address unethical things in the small things. People know your limits and your standards. Okay, so you guys can read through these key things to an ethical office. It's about communication, understanding what is required. You need to understand what are the ethical issues in your office, what are the requirements, those should be laid out to you. Pay attention to details, learn to speak up. So we've spoken about that today. Okay, then the role of the CA. Your role as a CA, we are relied on for transparency, for strategies, for public accountability, and you can see in the media the way that CAs have failed in these responsibilities. Shareholder accountability, that's why I said it's really important to remember that the stakeholder, not the company you're auditing, is the person that is your client effectively. Cash flow management, financial reporting, that at the end of the audit we go, is this company a going concern? Yes, absolutely. And the next day there was a British home store in America, not in America, in the UK, that was signed off as a going concern by a big audit firm. You can go and Google it. And the very next day they were out of business and sold for £1. Okay, that's little tick list of going concern is fundamental to shareholders getting their returns for people's livelihoods and investments. Steinhoff people was a blue chip company. People didn't question its value and therefore didn't do the right work to make sure that people were protected from those trying to manipulate the financial information. Okay, so our role is really important, not just as an auditor, but in any of your responsibilities as a CA in whatever role you are playing. Okay, then the role of the manager or employee, they need to communicate with you and be ethical, provide the mechanisms, and then your role as the employee, conduct yourself in terms of the code of conduct, know your resources, feel empowered to speak up, consult with others. Okay, so speak to mentors or those above you to bounce ideas off without disclosing confidential information. If anyone else has joined, I'd love to hear from you, apart from the other 4 who I know are here. And we're just going to end this section off with a rather ironic video on management training of ethics.
You may have heard that our company has been accused of unethical business practices.
Is it because of the falsified product safety tests?
Is it because of the false stories planted in the media about our competitors?
Is it because of our crime family connections?
What? Are you saying those things are unethical too? This thing is just snowballing. Now, where was I? 7 years ago. During the summer. The heck with it. Senior management has decided to confront this head-on and deal with the ethics problem directly.
They're surrendering to the authorities?
One might think that, but one would be wrong. No. They're sending all employees to mandatory ethics training classes.
Including managers such as yourself, correct?
No, sure, that wouldn't be very managerial, would it?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't every ethics violation in this company been perpetrated by managers?
Yes, but the point is managers are far too important to waste their valuable time taking worthless classes. That's what subordinates are for.
Okay, so now you know why you're in ethics training. Jokes, don't repeat that. Okay, so now we're going to look at some ethical decisions in complex dilemma. But before we do that, I just want to give you one more, it's the stages of moral development, one more awareness. And it goes back to Aziz's question as well, on how we develop our moral ability and what drives us to make moral or ethical decisions. And this will depend on what greater good we are serving. So at stage one, and you know small children do this really well in demonstration, avoid punishment. Okay, so it's called the punishment and obedience. They don't want to be punished, so they do the right thing. Don't do this or I'll smack you. Okay, I know that's not legal anymore, so that's probably unethical as well. But you know what I'm saying? So you don't want your toy taken away, so you do the right thing. Stage one. Stage two is serving your own interest. You know, if you do the right thing, you're going to get rewarded. So it's those, if you hand in the wallet, you get a reward. That shouldn't be driving you to hand in the wallet that doesn't belong to you. It should be greater than that. Okay. Instrumental, wanting others to hold favorable opinions of you. So we call this good boy, good girl orientation. Okay, so like that, I'm always doing the right thing. It's part of my brand. I do the right thing and I'm consistent and known for that. Stage 4 becomes helping society. Okay, so that law and order. This is the law. It helps everybody if we do the right thing. If everybody handed in the wallets that were left all over the show, it would be for the greater good. Everyone would get their cards back and not have to sit at home affairs all day. You know, so it's serving society. Then the fifth one, which is the highest one, is that promoting the welfare of everyone and protects everyone's right. And I think to Aziz, if the moral injustice or the unethical behavior is at this level, then you may have, like Nelson Mandela, a personal sacrifice for the greater good of the whole of society. And in a way, apartheid was a very unethical behavior that was stopped by him. So if you can re-look at that in terms of what people are doing in organizations and the impact of some of those acts, like Steinhoff with everyone losing their pensions. If there was someone in there who saw that the other people's pensions were more important than their own personal salary or bonus or succession or job even, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. But you have to get to that stage of development and that self-conviction almost. Yes, I want to show you how this plays out. So what happens is Sharon is a student in a maths class. Her parents often punish her severely when she gets bad grades. She has not been doing very well and is considering cheating on an upcoming maths test. Should she cheat on the exam? That's not a yes-no question. I'm going to show you how this moral development plays out based on how she answers or responds. So if she says yes, because if she cheats and does well, then her parents will be proud of her. You can see how that is stage 3, that good boy, good girl orientation. Okay, so she wants to be held in that favorable opinion, and that becomes her driving motivation to do the right thing. If, however, she says no because if she gets caught, she'll be punished, that is at stage 1, that avoiding punishment, that's the basic moral development stage. If she says no because cheating is against all the rules of the school, you actually see that is stage 4, law and orientation, versus this one, which says no because cheating is unfair to all the people of the class and a person should complete their own work. That is stage 5 in terms of the societal contracting. Okay, and then lastly, yes, because if she cheats and gets good grades, she'll be rewarded, is stage 2. Okay, so I don't know, Aziz, if that also illustrates to you like there is a cost, and it depends on the moral development of people in terms of how convicted basically they are to follow that through. Oh, and I just went, sometimes it skips about 40 million slides, sorry. Okay, so ethical decision-making tool. The last one is the smell test. Okay, so I think we spoke about this, the decision to explain, how can I explain this to my children? What would you feel about if this was reported about you on the news? So yes, you could be the person who's lost their job, but wouldn't you rather that than, yes, you were the person who was complicit in the process of people losing millions? Can you live with this decision, and can you keep up with it? Will it keep you up at night? And I know currently there's a lot of unethical people that don't seem to have these problems of not sleeping. Okay, and how would my mother feel about that decision? So when you're making ethical decisions, if something doesn't feel right, or you can't explain it to other people, or your mother, your father, or if it's keeping you up at night, then there's something that is not right about it. So what I want to do now is show you the framework, because this is going to be the tool that will help you in your careers of making these decisions. And you'll find them at the back of your post. You should have a post ethics booklet and there's a template there, and in that post ethics booklet you need to give a scenario where you faced an unethical unethical dilemma and how you use the decision tree to solve that, and that has to be handed in with your ANAs to SAICA to show that you are applying this learning that we've spoken about today. Okay, so the stages of the decision tree we spoke about right in the very beginning. Is it legal? If it's not legal, it's not ethical, and we stop right there. Okay, if it is legal, then we can continue to step 2, and then we say, is it right versus wrong? So is it against the code of ethics? Or is it that gut feel? Or what would my mother say? Or is it keeping me awake at night? If it fails more than one of these tests, then it is not ethical, and we stop it. And we report it or do something about it, or have an assertive conversation. However, if it does only fail one of these tests, you just proceed with caution. Otherwise, you go down to step 3. And in step 3, it becomes that dilemma of truth versus loyalty, individual versus community. And then you need to decide what is the greater good. You chat to someone who's more senior, had more experience, but decide if it's still not ethical, or if this doesn't feel right, you have to report it or do something about it. If we're still passing, then we get to decide it by the higher rights, the ends justifies the means, the rule-based or the care-based. And we can decide, because at the end of the day, remember, ethics is a choice and choosing what to do. Okay, so here's my decision tree. If it's not legal, you stop. End of story right there, which we said. If it is wrong versus right, you also stop there. Also, if it is against your gut feel, keeping you up at night, what would your mother say about it? What would your children say about it? However, if it only fails one of those tests, we go forward with caution, and then we look at the right versus right dilemmas. If we can't solve that, how are we going to, what ethical consequence are we going to do? And otherwise, we go to the higher right of those 3 where we decide. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is apply this. So what we are going to do is have a look at the situation again, where one of your peers has asked the manager, okay, now I'm going to skip this one. I want to do this one. One of your clients offered you free tickets to a major concert coming up. Your company prohibits accepting gifts, but tickets for this concert, and if you're not into music concerts, it's a soccer event. I know they're all cancelled at the moment, but imagine it was the Olympics or something that really excites you and you want to go to. So they've been sold out for a long time. What would you do? Can you guys type in your answers of how you would solve? Because is this legal or not legal? You can follow the decision tree, help you decide. Otherwise, type in what you think you would do in this situation, please. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. Nkosi, I will respect the company policy and not accept the gift or discuss with management. Okay, your management, I assume. So you will say, oh, I really want to go to this, but it's against policy. Is there anything I can do? On previous courses, I have had one alternative that may pass. Can anyone think of something? Aziz, I would not accept the gift because it's against company policy, okay? So remember, then it's not illegal because it's not law, but it comes into that second one, right versus wrong, is the policy. Boledi, not accept the ticket. Okay, guys, what do you think about if you paid for the ticket? So you said, can I pay you the last active market price for the ticket? Is that ethical or is that still unethical? Caesar, are you still there? And there are only 4 people here, Connie. Okay, yay, Caesar. Accepting and paying for the ticket will be unethical. Okay, why do you say that? Because it's not available to everyone, so you still do have a prejudice or an unfair advantage. But if you paid for it, doesn't that make it market related and then like anyone could have done that? Oh, but Lady says that it is ethical to accept the ticket. So now we've got conflicting opinions again, okay? If you pay for it. It is unethical because you are receiving a favor from the client, which is self-interest reflect. Okay, good observation. Guys, and that is the trick. If we start to accept little gifts or big gifts, then we become indebted to people. And whether we think that we're not indebted and we will remain independent, they may have a different view of that and come and call on us. So yes, I like the view that we discuss it with our management, say this is the situation, if I paid for it, would that be okay? But if it's going to impact your self-interest threat or your objectivity, then obviously you can't do it. I know in some of the clients used to give gifts to the auditors for completing their audit. Some of those auditors now, because of the policy of perceived independence, or have had to return the gifts of like 500 Rand vouchers or pens, and they've got socks instead, which won't impact that objectivity. Okay, but remember, you might be able to fly me around the world, and I will still give you the same opinion, but what is the perception? The perception is that I now look like I have impaired objectivity and perceived lack of independence. Okay, so it's such a fine gray line area that, and some people take that steep a lot more slippery than others, that they try and rule that out altogether. Okay, so a really interesting discussion, some good comments there. Okay, so what I want to do now, for the last thing, I'm going to just skip these ones. I want you guys to all read scenario 16, okay? So if you can read, it's right at the back of your workbooks. Okay, it's called The Unwelcome Phone Call. And then I want you to start answering. I want you all, because there's only 4 of you left on the call, to answer these questions. What action would you take? Okay? So, is it legal or not legal? Who are you in this situation? These are IFAC real life case studies, okay? So this is like the UK SAICA examples of things. And yes, I realize it's UK, but they can easily be applied to South Africa. You now have that decision-making tree. So use that decision-making tree. You've got the slide in front of you or at the back of the book. If you need me to put it back up on the slides, I can do that. But I want you to say, what is your role in and what would you do here based on that decision-making tree? And what ethical principles are in threat here? Integrity, objectivity, professional due care and competence, confidentiality. Are there any other legal obligations? And just like Aziz said, that the self-interest threat was the problem in the previous case, what is the self-interest threat here? Okay, so as soon as you've got answers, start typing them in. Just say roll dash and you can explain what you would do. Decision making tree, it's not legal or it is legal because, and then the ethical principles. So just dump the information down, I'll sift through it, and then we can have a discussion about that. Okay. Okay, so as you decide what to do, can you just start typing answers? What action would you take? If you guys are together in a group, you can discuss it and just say this is your group decision. I think in Nkosi you're on your own. Okay, and then just put some of the ethical principles that are at threat here. And then any other legal obligations. Okay, this is it for today, guys. So as soon as you write some answers down, we can discuss them. I will send you on your merry way into the quiet world outside. Or maybe you can just go down the passage to the rest of your house if you're in your house. Can you just write taste again? Okay, guys, it's a short scenario. What would you do? I hope that it's so quiet because you're writing long responses to me. I can't even see if people are writing on this one. First, check if it is legal, if it's against normal business practice and brings, then it raises a familiarity threat. I would report the irregularity. Okay, thanks, Aziz. Is it legal? What is he basically doing? He's basically bribing the VAT man, isn't he? To not look too deeply into what is happening. Okay, and so what are your responsibilities? Like Aziz says, under NOCLA, or non-disclosure, non-compliance of the VAT Act, you need to report that, okay? But then, remember, on the other hand, you're a sole trader. Now, in sole practice, now people are going to go, well, they're not going to let you do their books because then you're just going to report them. So you have that assertive conversation with the clients about what he's doing and what it perceived independence, what principles are being brought into question here. Well, objectivity, integrity, are you just going to let this slide? So can you see all of the different obligate or consequences? Okay, does anyone else have any thoughts or input here? Okay, in some of the other scenarios, and it might be worth reading the other scenarios and discussing them with the people in your office or the guys in the team. There's somewhere they're passing through greater expenses than are actually allowable. That the implications there are that you're paying less tax than you should be. Okay, so then the legal obligation is to the Tax Act. And are you complying with that? Just like here is the VAT Act. And how are you complying with that? And what are you doing about that? Okay, and then if you just let this slide, obviously you are too familiar with the person and not doing the right thing. Okay, I don't know if anyone else is waiting to say anything else. I just want to go back to this legal. Is it legal? You'll be surprised, guys, how many stop or fail the first two. Is it legal? There's loads of legal requirements and documentation. And then, is it right versus wrong? Was it against the code of conduct, or you not being able to sleep at night, or something like that? Then it's up to you to make those decisions. So like I said, I can't change your mind. I can't be there when you're faced with an unethical situation. But just think about the perception, think about the impact, and the impact you want to make. And if we can all change our circle of influence, then that's all we can do. Okay, so good luck. I trust you'll have good, long, ethical careers. Stay safe. Stay away from this virus. And thanks, guys, for your participation. I'm sorry this afternoon was a bit of a disaster, but I trust you at least got some benefit out of it and enjoyed this morning. Okay, good to see you all. Well, not even. Bye. Okay, bye. Thanks, Nkosi. Exactly, the weekend expenses, which you read the wrong scenario, but that is unethical because it was against the VAT Act. No, that's not against the VAT Act. That would be against the SARS Act. Thanks, Caesar. Thanks for your participation.